Good evening, viewers, and welcome to Community Corner here on Acts 25. Today we bring you part 2 of the two-part series where we were chatting with Mr. Neal Petersen. Mr. Petersen, the first black man to race around the world. Also, we spoke briefly about his challenges which he faced, his life growing up and his dreams. One of his dreams was to race around the world, which he did. So as we start this second part, my first question to you, Neal, is welcome again.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be back on the show.
Right. You have just raced around the world.
27,000
miles.
Solo.
9 months by yourself. As you said, no communication. So you had no way of relaying any message to back and forth with any family members, I would have.
Well, in the second round the world race, the one I just completed, I had satellite telecommunications, but in the early voyages,
well, that one.
So technology has changed.
So when you return back to South Carolina, you had accomplished part of your dream, which was to race.
18 years of my dream.
Right. What did you sit down and say? What next for Neal?
Well, and that was the tough part, because that's where I had to reinvent myself. I was inspired by Richard Broadhead to race around the world, and he has no idea that I actually did it. And so I came to realize that as I emulated this man, I now have obligation, because somebody might have been paying attention to me. And now what am I going to do to make the world a better place? I'd become a successful racing sailor, successful solo racing sailor. Now what? So that's when I moved into a cottage. I began working on writing a new book, Journey of a Hope Merchant, which became my autobiography.
What is that book entail? What is it about?
And
your journey around?
was my life story of coming out of the apartheid South Africa, building the boat, having this big dream, all the critics saying, you can't do this, it's impossible, give it up, but not giving it up. Continuing to find the relationships to support the journey, to support the dream, because in order to become a successful solo racing sailor, there is a tremendous team behind me who helps me. The folks who helped me build the boat, who helped provide the equipment, the rigging, the sails, ultimately the electronics when I did have electronics on the boat. Gwen, my ex-girlfriend, who helped prepare the boat physically and prepare the meals that I could cook on the boat. My success was implementing their successes together as one team. And then finally, I might be alone on that boat racing, but my success depends on how everybody did all their pieces, and then how I respond to when things go wrong, and ultimately was able to finish alone, but with the support of this tremendous team. And so the book is about the teamwork, about the relationships, it's a love story, it's a tragedy, it's an adventure story.
Is it available in Trinidad and Tobago?
I don't know. It's available online.
Okay.
Everything today is available online.
Yeah. Now, you are also a keynote speaker, a global entrepreneur. Tell me about those parts of your life now.
So after the Round the World race, I had to refocus on now what will I do? Where do I go from here? I've written this book, and when I was putting the campaign together, I had to learn marketing, I had to learn communications, I had to learn negotiations, finance. These are all the components to run a successful racing campaign, but these are also the components of running a successful business. And I started thinking, what am I going to do now? What kind of business am I going to be in? And that's when I decided that I will continue and build my speaking business and inspiring others. You take your success, and when you focus on helping others because of your success, you focus on significance. And so as a keynote speaker, my job is how do I help people realize their dreams? And so corporations, whether it's an IBM or a Cisco of the world or one of these big financial houses, they bring me on board as a keynote speaker, typically as an opening keynote speaker, and I travel all over the world to inspire their audiences to not just to dream and to dream big, but how to implement those goals, how to build that stronger communication internally with their staff, and to elevate their organizations to the next level. And so my job as a keynote speaker is to strengthen people, but it presented an opportunity. A lot of these companies are publicly traded. I got to see how these teams work together, learned about their companies, learned about their philosophies. I started thinking, well, I really like what they're doing here. And so I started looking at their stock, and I met very wealthy people in those organizations. And I started saying, you know what, why don't we start combining some of these folks? Why don't we start taking equity positions in some of these companies? And then we started meeting entrepreneurs who had great ideas, but they didn't have capital. I got to know these leaders of these companies, and I said, why don't you start investing in these folks? And that's how I became an entrepreneur and grew upon that and started investing in different types of companies. And it's about relationships. You don't become successful by yourself. You become successful because of the relationships of the people who come together, who bring you together, who make things happen. I'm here because of TTSA. I came here to talk to the youth of TTSA whilst we were refitting my yacht. I came to Trinidad to do the work on my boat because this is where we spend a lot of time working on the boat. But we have skills.
Yeah.
I came to use the skills of Trinidad for my vessel, but it is also important to contribute something back to the community you're interacting with. And that's when I said, let me give a talk at TTSA to the youth. Let me utilize this international experience I've had to inspire the young people in your community.
Yeah.
And one thing leads to another. Here we are on this television show together.
Yeah.
It's relationships.
Yeah. Now, if we chat briefly, you have a lot of knowledge of what is taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. We see the crime rate.
Yes.
We see the persons who are committing crimes are very young, tender ages. As a keynote speaker, or if given the opportunity to speak to young people, what would you advise them? Because you find that one of the major excuses people make, because they say, I'm from a single parent home.
Excuse.
You know, my father didn't give me this.
Excuse.
I don't know who my mother is. You know, why I bring this up, because remember off camera I spoke to you about on your boat when you got scared, how you came out of that, and you said, if you don't come out of it, you will die.
That's right. Well, fear is your ally.
Yeah.
Fear is a warning mechanism saying, if you don't pay attention to this, something bad is going to happen. And in order to prevent that, pay attention to what's happening around you. Lift your head up, look around. Know what is it that is threatening your life, and then act. And you cannot become paralyzed. If you become paralyzed on a boat when you are out there sailing, you will die. And in life, if you become paralyzed by your fears, you will accomplish nothing. So we've got to learn to face and conquer our fears. But also, we've got to learn to take away the excuses. Here in Trinidad, you have a thriving marine industry, and you've got a thriving oil industry. Trinidad is a wealthy island, but the wealth is slanted. It is not in the hands of the total populace. It's concentrated in some hands, and there's a lot of poverty in Trinidad. There's a lot, as you said, single families, young people with lost dreams. You've got gang warfare. You've got the issues of drugs taking place. This is affecting your economy because for a couple of years, we did not bring our yacht to Trinidad because you were under lockdown. Your crime had gotten so bad that everybody was afraid if we came here, would we be caught up in your crime? And so when the boats don't come here, the people who are working on these boats, so if power boats where I hauled out, so if the yard becomes a little bit less full, and yet they've got tremendous skills of lifting catamarans and being able to sort of provide the services. Trinidad Rigging, one of the best riggers in the Caribbean, who can solve problems. I mean, we come here because of these services, but we are concerned about security. And so one of the ways that you really can address some of these things is you've got to get your youth engaged. You've got to get them realizing that, you know what, selling drugs is not the way to live. You're going to end up in jail or dead. Become a positive, constructive contributor to society. You have an obligation to make your world a better place. And sailing has given me some tremendous life skills. Get these young people onto the water. And I'm a little disappointed with the government. The government has been cutting the sailing budget in this country. And I've seen countries who have expanded their sailing budget, and as they expanded their sailing budget, their crime has gone down. The confidence of the youth has gone up. And you're an island. You can't be afraid of the sea. In Tobago, I'm hearing stories that they don't do anything around the water with the young people because it's dangerous. Well, you're an island. Where do you think people are going to go? We need our beaches. You're also an island that depends upon oil. Your youth have opportunities to work and run these ships that go out to the oil fields, to work on these oil platforms, to work on the ferry, to work on the waterfront, stevedores. This is your nautical heritage. Trinidad and Tobago became amazing countries because of the sea. And you cannot fear the sea. So I'm saying, face those fears of the sea and come back to it. Because somebody else was scared doesn't mean that you've got to be scared. And then we've got to get these youth also onto the boats. We've got to get them sailing dinghies. And we have to get them coming back and learning the life skills of tacking a boat and sorting out a problem on the water, on a boat, being part of a team and doing the teamwork, because these are the things we do on land every day in life as well. The communication are critical. And instead of spending more money on building prisons, you've got to be spending money on education, on educating the children. We've got to get beyond the corruption of government and the problems of government to solving the real world problems of without a knowledge base. What's going to happen to our children? Where are your workforce going to come from? Where are your consumers going to come from?
Now, as a keynote speaker, where are some of the places around the world that you have had the opportunity and the privilege to talk?
I have traveled all over the world, from Europe, London, Barcelona, Portugal. I've been over to Asia, to China, to Bangkok, Thailand. We've been to South Africa, South America, to Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've traveled all over the world, done events in the Caribbean. And again, so that is one of the great parts of being a keynote speaker, is I travel to the most exotic places in the world, stay at amazing resorts and hotels, and I get to work with great people, and I get very well paid to do this and to share my story and to inspire others. But the real value is when somebody comes to you and says, you told us something some years ago, and this is what I did with it, and this is how it changed my life. My life was changed by other folks who showed me as a beacon of what was possible. Now I'm reflecting that. I had one gentleman who calls me the birthing father of his company. He sat in my audience. There were 10,000 people in that audience. He stood in line after my keynote for an hour and a half to buy a copy of my autobiography, Journey of Hope Merchant. And he heard the meeting planner asking my wife if I could be in Barcelona that weekend to do another conference for IBM. So this man ended up taking 8 of his employees to Barcelona to come and hear me speak, and resigned. And he went and started up his own company. And when his company reached 100 employees and they'd reached a level of profitability, he brought me back in to come and help work with his staff. I had no idea that I inspired this man to start up his own company. And then when I worked with him and got to meet his staff and helped elevate them to the next level, he actually offered me an advisory seat on his board. Unfortunately, I didn't take it. And now I'm kicking myself because some years later, he sold his company for over $400 million. So that's one example of, I know what my work as a keynote speaker has done, has inspired somebody, but there are times we don't know what we are doing. But it is the feedback we get from our audience. Walking somewhere in an airport and somebody tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Mr. Petersen, I heard you speak some years ago, and this is what I've done with my life. If we can just every day touch somebody, make their world a better place. If we are the bottom of the pyramid, the tip of the bottom, and if we inspire 1 or 2 people above us, and they inspire 1 or 2 people each, it becomes astronomical in how many people we can reach and how we can make a difference. And if we wake up every day and think, who can I help today? How can I make a difference? What value can I add to society today? If we all sit that way, versus, oh, poor me, I don't have any of this or I don't have any of that. If we get beyond what our problems are and find the solutions to other people's problems, we'll solve ours too.
Well, hopefully, you'll be leaving on Monday. Hopefully. When you leave here, what's next for you? What does that journey entail? When you leave Trinidad, what's up for Neal?
My wife and I are on board our catamaran, and we have a beautiful 50-foot catamaran, which we bought here in the Caribbean, and we've refitted the boat here in Trinidad. And so we are heading to the Western Caribbean and then through Panama Canal and on our way across the Pacific Ocean to Asia. So over the next several years, I'm planning another voyage around the world with my wife and I. But in the ports that we are stopping, like we've done here in Chaguaramas and in Trinidad, we are looking at other ports of where we can be involved in the community and help to continue to make a difference. I'm extremely blessed having this boat. It's a tremendous privilege of being a successful yacht owner today. But with that success comes the obligations. And that obligation that we have is how do we inspire the youth around the world? Because this is not just our future sailors. I'm not interested in so much as growing sailors. I'm interested in growing great human beings. Yeah. Utilizing the stories of the sea because that's what we have in common. In these coastal ports, it is a unifier. The sea doesn't distinguish between Trinidadian and South African or American, black or white, rich or poor. It makes us equally as wet. So it is starting with that common unifying position and building upon that to how do we address education? How do we address crime? I've worked in prisons in Bermuda, in Ireland, and here I said to these prisoners, you are amazing entrepreneurs, except you have the wrong product. If your product benefited society versus hindered society, you wouldn't be here. So, and it's not just about the cost of incarceration. And if you look at the United States, it costs over $60,000 per year to incarcerate a person.
One person?
One person. And I don't know what the costs in Trinidad are, but I'll tell you the costs are going to be phenomenal. But that's the beginning of your cost. The loss of revenue. When that person sits in jail, that person is not earning money. That person is not paying taxes. That person is not adding to GDP. That person is not supporting their family. That is the bigger cost. And then there is the social cost. When that person comes out of jail, they can't find a job. And so they're forced into again, sometimes the circumstances forces them back into crime. We've got to break the cycle. And that cycle has to be broken through education. We need not to be building new prisons. We need to be building vocational training schools. We need to be providing opportunities and changing how people learn. Technology today and the way things are being done in schools is old school. We need to utilize technology in a positive way, not to play video games, but to use it as a teaching tool, as an exploratory tool, to open up the doors of possibilities and to challenge our communities, to challenge our youth, to be contributors, not takers.
We need to take a break. We're going to be taking a short break, viewers. We'll be returning with Mr. Neal Petersen. When we come back, I want to touch briefly on when you look at the young people throughout the world, they show similar signs, of violent behavior. I would like you to tell me what you think is the cause of that. Viewers, we're going to take a short break and we'll return in a while.
Hi, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm George, host of Scoreboard, your Tuesday night sports program on Axe Television Network. Catch me at 8 p.m. with a repeat on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Remember, Scoreboard, real sports, the news, the views, the interviews. Or you can log on to www.axe25tt.com. Remember, Scoreboard, right here on Axe Television Network.
Welcome back, viewers. Welcome back to Community Corner here on Axe 25 as we wrap up here with the last couple of minutes speaking with Neal Petersen. Neal, before the break, I mentioned to you, when you look at young people generally around the world, they seem to share similar tendencies. Computer games, some violence, the way we dress, the tattoos on our hands. What do you think is the major cause?
Well, we seem to have, every generation has a concern about the next generation. Mm-hmm. Our grandparents worried about our parents worried about us, now we're worrying about this new generation of youth. And unfortunately, I think the disconnect is they've been given so much in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And so through being given too much, we have made it too easy for them. We've allowed them to find excuses. We have two parents now working to earn a living, and we have latchkey kids. Mm-hmm. Our education system is an archaic system that was designed for the Industrial Revolution, and we are now in the technology revolution. And so these kids are sitting here and they're playing these games, and these video games will suck them in. And they become addictive. And they are losing their communication skills. The new language in the world of texting. And now we're adding words to the Webster Dictionary because they didn't exist before. And we are consolidating sentences to a few letters and numbers to make it sound. So we are losing certain things in communication, and we are losing the connectivity. Families are not sitting down together and eating a meal. They are running in different directions, and they're constantly being distracted by the technology around them. This has a breakdown. Some years ago, darling, my wife and I got married after the race, met my wife after the race, and we've worked together, and she supported my keynote business, and I was hired by the Department of Defense to go to Guantanamo Bay to work with the Defense Force there on change. And I happened to have the opportunity of being given a tour of the detention center and looking at the war on terror. And a lot of the things we're dealing with are people are afraid. Somebody is Muslim and a Christian is afraid of a Muslim. Somebody dresses differently. Fear. Somebody has a bunch of tattoos. Again, we have our preconceived images, and we don't boil down to not what separates us, but what do we have in common. And so I did a lot of work in Guantanamo Bay, 2 trips to Guantanamo Bay as keynote speaker. And when I returned from Guantanamo, a dinner was thrown for my wife and I in Washington, D.C. with the top sitting admirals. If somebody dropped a bomb on that dinner, we would have wiped out the leadership of the U.S. Navy. And each one of these men and their families have traveled, but each one of these admirals had served in different conflicts. And they spoke about how hard it was when they were young people in those wars, the psychology of what they went through. Then they spoke about this last war that we've been involved in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they spoke about how easy it was to convert the youth into killing machines. And I was shocked. They said, yes, electronic warfare today is an extension of a game. Flying a drone, these kids have learned tremendous skills playing an aviation game. Or these games of running around and shooting with all the different masks and the different types of weapons. They were able to easily convert everyday children, everyday normal people, into effective soldiers, killing machines. So I'm very concerned here about the abuse of technology, of when you become so focused on playing a game and your reality field becomes distorted. Where does the game stop and where does reality start? And I see kids 5, 6 years of age playing violent video games, so they become desensitized. With all the violence that we have on television, it's so nice to be on a show that does not support violence. And so when everyday people are seeing violence, they become comfortable with violence. They accept violence. And that's not the world we want to live in. That's not the world we need to be building upon. We need to come back to the basic fundamentals of what is it that we have in common? What makes you and what makes I equal and similar versus what separates us? And we'll discover more combines us. One cruising family I met who described themselves as Christian evangelical right-wing Republicans, and they left America to sail around the world to change the world, handing out Bibles, and the world changed them. And when they came back from this trip, and I met them here in the Caribbean, they had complete different view to when they had sailed away. They become very open. And I said, what is the one of the countries that had the biggest impact on you? And the 16-year-old, 17-year-old daughter said, well, it's a toss-up between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Yemen. And I said, but that's a contradictory. These are 2 hardcore Muslim countries. Why? And he said, well, they worship different than we worship. But we wanted the same things. We wanted our children to grow up in a society without violence, a society without fear, a society of acceptance, a society of respect. And we've got to come back and realize that we all look at the world in a different way. But when we come to accept people, when we come to really love each other as human beings, not for what we can get out of somebody, but what we can give of our souls, of our experiences, of our knowledge, of our relationships, we now end up in a better world. And in the world of sailing, we don't have time for the BS. You meet somebody, you become friends very quickly because of the common interest. And you also learn to say goodbye. Our children have to learn these lessons. Our children, my granddaughter, my wife has a son and his daughter. She and her mom spent 5 months on our yacht sailing in the Caribbean with us and watching her grow, watching her play with other kids. For some of these kids, she couldn't even speak the language because she speaks English and these kids spoke Spanish, but yet can find the common ground. And our politicians have to come and wake up. Our politicians truly have to wake up. It's not about pulling somebody else down. It's about how do you pick people up? How do we solve real problems versus the corruption? Let's get beyond these conversations. Let's get down to, we the people have elected them to be our problem solvers. And that means go into the world and be a diplomat. Be someone that becomes inclusive and brings people together to work and solve the problems, not point fingers and make things worse, and then turn around and say, well, these people hate us and we hate them, so therefore we should start wars. We've got to learn to get along in this world.
Before we wrap, if you have the opportunity to do this all over again, will you do the same way or will you change?
I'll keep doing it the same way. I think it is one person at a time.
Yeah.
And I just think we need to find greater ways of engaging people. And what a way of utilizing the sea as a means of engaging people.
Well, Neal, it was indeed a pleasure, as my honor to meet you and to sit here with you and to chat with you. I know that we can go on for another 30 minutes or another hour. There is so much that we still didn't even mention. But I want to thank you for taking this opportunity to come to Acts 25 and to have this interview. Again, I want to thank Mr. Valentine Bradshaw for bringing you here to the station. And I hope and pray that you and your wife will have a safe journey and you all will continue touching the lives of young people as they go about. And it's not the old boat you have now, we have a new boat.
Nope, I'm on
so I'm sure that if I send you an email, you could respond to me.
Yes, I have the capabilities of reaching out.
Again, thank you.
Thank you for
and
having
God
me in
bless you.
Trinidad.
Well, viewers, we have come to the end of part 2 of this interview with Neal Petersen. I really hope that somewhere in this 2-part series, there is something for a viewer out there who might have challenges, who might be saying, no, I can't do it, or have some disability or something. Here is a man who showed what he is capable of and what his dreams meant to him. And he has achieved all the dreams, and I'm sure that there is a lot more he has to offer, not only Trinidad and Tobago or his birthplace, South Africa, but the world. So viewers, we thank you for staying with us, and we hope that you will join us next week, Thursday, at the same time, 6 p.m. Remember, there's also a repeat of this show on Friday morning at 12. So if you miss any part of it, you can tune in to Friday morning and see the program in its entirety. So again, thank you very much. God bless you.